Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
Alex.
Alex, the preseason is over. The very next time that we have a game, it will count. And as always, thank you to the listeners for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and Threads with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
Today's show, we are doing a recap and just going on to individual points and takeaways for the preseason. So we will start with the first matchup, which is the Steelers and Falcons, and we'll just go on from there with each matchup to talk about our points.
All right. So the Steelers at the Falcons that you just mentioned, the Falcons only played the backups, which is really interesting considering it's Ritter's first year starting. And he does have 4 first-round talents, so there's not much to learn from the Falcons, but they feel like Ritter is ready for the season. The Steelers took a different approach where they did have the starters play, and Pickett looked good again. Is he actually good? Harris and Warren both looked good, and the pass catchers all look good on that team. Like, is it because they're playing vanilla defenses, or is Kenny Pickett really taking a step forward?
So I wasn't a huge fan of Kenny Pickett going into the draft last season. And I think that he's made a lot of strides because last year he had a very bumpy year. They didn't score very many touchdowns. They weren't a very good offense. But this year, in preseason so far, he definitely looks like he's turned the corner. He looks like a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL. This offense looks like it's lighting it up a bit. Harris and Warren look like they're going to be a 1-2 punch with Harris being the primary back and Warren being the fast change of pace back who could potentially get a bigger workload if something happens to Harris. So he's someone I really like. And I'm really liking George Pickens and Deontay Johnson both being the 2 focal points as far as the passing offense goes. And it's nice seeing Calvin Austin continue to have a decent preseason. And I'm excited about the Steelers' offense. The Falcons, however, it's very hard to be excited because there's question marks, like you said, with Ritter's first season being the starter. And I think that there's a lot of questions when it comes to the pass catchers. Can Drake London get all the snaps and targets that we want a number 1 receiver to get? Will Pitts have a better season? Will he be worthwhile drafting early? For the running back situation, is it just going to be Bijan Robinson? Are they going to use Algier? Are they going to use Patterson? So there's a lot of questions that preseason has not answered because these guys haven't gotten a lot of playing time. So that is more up in the air. They could be a good offense. We just don't know.
Yeah, and it will be an interesting watch, and they do kick off against my Carolina Panthers week 1. So it'll be really interesting to see Ritter versus Young and see who is better right now. And then throughout the season, it'll be interesting to see who takes a step forward and a stride forward.
Yeah, the NFC South is going to be a very interesting division right now because most of the teams are on a more even playing field than the other divisions. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yes, it will, and extra interesting for me since I'm a fan of one of the teams. So,
all right, let's move on to the AFC South. We had the Colts versus the Eagles, and that was a very interesting matchup in its own right. Jeff, what were your takeaways on this one?
So Eagles play mostly backups. We're going to sound like a broken record on this one here, but the Colts did not. They played Anthony Richardson, who did not play the second preseason game. He does look raw, but he did make some exciting plays. He did finish the night with less than 40% completion percentage against the Eagles' backups. So that is something to watch as we go into the year. And it looks like Jackson and Hall appear to be splitting time in the backfield, and they both scored a rushing touchdown for their team. And it looks like Hall is playing with Richardson the most, but it's possible that Jackson might see those snaps in the regular season. What observations did you make from that game?
Uncle Rico looked good again, and that's a nickname for Gardner Minshew because he looks like Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. I thought that Tanner McKee still looked better than Marcus Mariota, so I think Tanner McKee should be the number 2 for the Eagle side. Sermon can't play his way onto the roster. We anticipate that will be a cut soon. When it comes to Richardson, though, as a quarterback, I thought that I'm kind of in the middle on his performance. I know a lot of people are out there saying that it's a lot of drops from his receivers. I know they're looking at his completion percentage, saying that he's not very accurate, that he should have a higher completion percentage. But I think that he played decently. There were a lot of reads that I think that he needs to improve on. He did throw a little too high for his receivers, so it did hit them in the hands, but it was a very challenging catch if they were able to pull it off. He seemed to throw into a lot of contested catch areas, and ones that were completed, he had to have receivers come back. So I don't think that the receivers helped him. I don't think that his accuracy is quite where we need it to be. So it's kind of a mixed. Overall, I think it's positive. It just makes me question why they didn't play him preseason game 2, because I feel like he needed more game time reps, and it's very confusing why they didn't give it to him, because he could already have had a better performance this week. So that I'm still scratching my head over that. I'm still scratching my head over the backup running back situation. So I don't know, outside of Jonathan Taylor, who is going to be the guy. I think we've seen what Kenyon Drake is. I don't know if he's the guy. Evan Hull seems like he's the passing down back. I'm not sure how great he is at actually rushing, but he seems like the primary guy. I don't really buy into Deion Jackson. I don't think that Deion Jackson is that good of a rusher, and he doesn't show enough pop to me. So I don't know if he's long for the roster. So, I mean, I would bet on someone like maybe Zach Moss when he's healthy. He could potentially pair with Evan Hull if Jonathan Taylor's not playing or gone to another team. So that would be my guesses, but it's not a pleasant fantasy situation right now, in my opinion.
I would agree. So we should move on to the Lions at the Panthers. What were some of your observations here?
So in the Lions and Panthers, I thought that Bryce Young shows more improvement as well, and he's looking like he's getting more comfortable and closer to being a starting NFL quarterback, which is he was taken first overall. That's what the Panthers want to see. So I really like that, and it looks like he has that connection with Adam Thielen. Granted, Chark is hurt, so maybe Chark would have gotten more looks, but I think that Thielen's a really good safety blanket, and he's a nice veteran, and I hope that he continues to develop with Jonathan Mingo, who is another fellow rookie. So I'm encouraged by that. I would really like to know what's going on with Miles Sanders and if he's going to be healthy in time for the start of the season to really help take pressure off of Bryce as well. Didn't really see much on Detroit's side, but I think they started all their backups and rested all their starters. So there wasn't really much to see in that regard. That seems to be the case. One team rests all their starters, the other team actually plays them. It seems like that's most of these matchups. But Jeff, what were your takeaways?
No, it's exactly what I had saw, and it did look like they were getting a connection with Thielen. So we're gonna see here what Mingo, Thielen, Shark looks like week 1. I do anticipate Miles Sanders to be ready week 1. I think they're holding him out for precautionary reasons, and also they don't want to hand off to. They don't want Sanders taking unnecessary hits in the preseason.
Yeah.
So it does seem like that's one of the teams that is trying to keep their running back that they did pay pretty decent money for healthy.
Yep. And also, we forgot to mention this, but Bryce Young was out there with some rushes, and that's something that we haven't seen much in college. I know I speculated that I thought he might be a better rusher from a quarterback than we gave him credit for during the draft process, because it seemed like he had that ability, but he was told not to rush in college. And now that's something that can help extend plays and take a little bit of pressure off the offensive line until they can fix their scheme. Overall, I think that's encouraging as long as he can avoid taking an injury.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that really helps with their protection, and it'll help with the run game later, especially when you get Miles Sanders back in there. And I think that element is just an extra thing that they need right now. Hopefully he doesn't have to rush his entire career.
So all in all, it's been encouraging so far for the two rookie quarterbacks that we've talked about thus far. But we can go ahead and start talking about some second year guys with the Patriots and Titans. So Malik Willis was out the entire time with the Titans because Levis has been hurt, and they haven't deigned to bring in a fourth quarterback. So he was out there. He looked overall pretty good, but he did have those 2 picks. So not perfect. And Bailey Zapp looked all right, but not good enough to threaten Mac Jones for his starting spot. I thought that the running backs for the Titans looked really good. So Julius Chestnut and TJ Spears both looked really good. And it looks like that group behind Henry is going to actually be a very solid group. So if Henry misses time, I think that they'll still be okay. And Julius Chestnut, I mean, he got a touchdown in the air and 42 yards. So that's pretty impressive coming from the backfield. The wide receiver group hasn't impressed me for the Titans. So if Trey Burks misses time, which it looks like he might be coming back in time for week 1, but if he misses time, I don't think that there's anyone outside of Hopkins that is good. So they need Trey Burks back. And I didn't see anything positive really on the Patriots side. So, Jeff, what were your takeaways?
So it does look like Willis is going to be the backup going into the year, which is pretty amazing considering how bad he looked last year. So it does seem like he has actually been putting in a lot of work to get to this point, and it makes me question watching Levis's durability here, if Levis will ever be part of that quarterback room, like a meaningful part of that quarterback room. And I just think that might go down as a wasted pick for Tennessee. I don't believe that they have their quarterback of their future on their roster, and that's actually really sad.
The fortunate part is Willis, I think, was a third round pick, and Levis is a second round pick. So it's not as bad as, the 49ers with the Trey Lance aspect, but I think that it's decent stabs. So maybe one of these guys pans out. And let's not forget that everyone wants immediate success and immediate results, and that's just not how everything pans out. Sometimes it takes a while for these guys to develop, and Willis already looks way better than he did last year. So there's hope for both of these guys going forward. Since I brought up the Trey Lance situation, let's go ahead and talk about the 49ers and Chargers matchup. Jeff, what were the takeaways that you had for that matchup?
Oh boy. So the Chargers have decided not to play their starters at all this season, which means that they probably will get off to a slow start to begin the year. But on the inverse of that, they do enter the year fully healthy. So that's a big deal. Purdy did play again, and he did look pretty good. And he did lead a touchdown drive, and it does look like he'll be ready for week 1. And newly minted second stringer, Sam Darnold, also looked good, and it does appear that Darnold actually might be the better quarterback on the roster. At least that's what he's done in practice and in the preseason so far. So it'll be interesting to see if Purdy holds the job for the entire year. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. I like Purdy, but he hasn't looked 100% yet. And he is a late round pick. Like he was, I think, Mr. Irrelevant, wasn't he, last year?
Yes.
So Darnold is coming off of a first round pedigree. He has played very well in preseason. He's done well in practice. It's entirely possible that they could turn to Sam Darnold as the starter at some point. I don't know if it would be week 1 though. It is interesting though,
No,
and it's
yeah.
something to monitor. So I wouldn't feel super secure out there for all you Brock Purdy owners. So it's something to monitor. On the Chargers side, I thought it was interesting that it looks like Eason Stick is the primary backup for Herbert going into the season, and Duggan was coming in as the third quarterback. We'll have more to talk about Duggan on our next podcast when we talk about all the transactions and stuff for the week. But I thought he's played pretty decently in the preseason, so I hope that he sticks around on either with the Chargers or on a roster. I think both of these guys have been pretty solid, considering that they're playing with the twos and the options that are available with the twos. It's interesting to me that Quentin Johnston seems to be behind Palmer still, so he seems to be the fourth wide receiver going into the season. Josh Kelly seems like he's the best backup running back still. Spiller still isn't it as far as I can tell. They might be looking for a running back who gets cut from another team to try to bring in to replace either of these guys, or at least Spiller, maybe. I think that this is the deepest wide receiver group that Herbert's going to play with this year, so I'm encouraged that they are going to have a lot of options. I'm excited for the Kellen Moore offense to not be vanilla and actually see the regular season version. So that would be interesting, and I am encouraged on the 49ers side that Ayuk and Deebo Samuel both seem to be used quite a bit. Kittle really only got one target, but he's a savvy veteran. I don't think that they're planning on they were planning on using him a lot in the preseason anyway. So it seems like most of the starters avoided injuries, which is positive for both teams.
I would completely agree with that, and I don't believe Kittle needs targets in the preseason. I don't think he needs to get hit in the preseason. So I think this is kind of why they went that way. And I do believe that Kittle will be used more. I think that's one upgrade that Purdy shows over what Garoppolo could show last year, is that there is multiple useful targets now. And Garoppolo would always hone in on one, maybe two targets at the most, and then the rest would go missing for a game.
So, well, hopefully Purdy's the guy. If not, they look like they're going to be okay with Darnold. So let's move on to the Bills and the Bears matchup. They actually had their starting units out this week. Jeff, what were your takeaways?
Oh, so Fields and Allen look good in their last preseason action, but the Bears' offensive line could be a big problem this upcoming season. It does not seem like they're able to get very many rushing yards or rushing lanes for their running backs. So it could be a spot where Fields takes a step forward, but we just don't see it in the stat sheet because of the offensive line. And that's really sad. The Bills looked really good and they look ready to go. And they used Damian Harris. They used James Cook. They've Diggs caught a ball. Gabe Davis was out there. Like their offense looks ready to roll and looks like they're ready for the regular season to begin.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that it looks like James Cook is the primary back and he's the passing down back, but Damon Harris, as people suspected, was used in the red zone and got that goal line touchdown. So that was interesting to see the actual usage play out, the suspected usage play out. That's probably what's going to happen during the regular season. So that's something to keep in mind for those of you like me who love James Cook. You may not get the touchdowns you wanted, but that's how it was with Singletary before him. So we're not unfamiliar with that situation. I agree with you that the Chicago game, it looked like they could not run block to save their lives, and none of these guys really looked that great. Justin Fields, he didn't look exceptional in this matchup either, but hopefully he can turn the corner when the season starts. I know some of these guys, it only takes one big play for them to get massive yards. So it might be something where he has a low actual passing volume, but has high yards per attempt or per catch because these guys have huge plays like DJ Moore, one reception for 40 yards, stuff like that. So I am encouraged with the passing side, and I think the rushing side, I think they're trying to acquire offensive linemen to help fill in the gaps. So we'll see. I just wouldn't go super excited and draft guys ahead of where they're going if you fall in love with the Chicago Bears.
Right. Absolutely. I probably wouldn't move them up at all at this point.
Okay, quick and easy there. Let's talk about Seattle at the Green Bay Packers. Seattle mostly played their backups, and the Packers did trot out the first team offense for a bit. What were your takeaways?
Whew. So Jordan Love looks really good and has a connection with both Dobbs and Watson. Again, this we could file this away in the Pickett conversation, and we need to get more information if they're facing vanilla defenses or they're facing too many backups. What's happening to where the point where it looks like Love's taking this step and it looks like Pickett's taking this step? We're gonna find out really quick in the regular season what the reason was for that. Are you coming around to Jordan Love?
No, I think he's still doing a lot of short passes, and I think he's more of a game manager type. So I'm not targeting him in fantasy as my quarterback, not even as a number two in two quarterback or super flex leagues. So I just think maybe he plays well enough to not hurt the team, but I don't think he's someone who's going to light up the stat sheet. I did see that he got a few rushes though, so that was interesting. I wasn't sure he could have that aspect of his game. So that's interesting to me. I thought Drew Luck on the other side of the field played okay. Maybe he could be a good backup for Geno Smith. Maybe he could be the eventual guy for Seattle. I know that they got him back in that Russell Wilson trade, so it's interesting to see him develop and not look as poor as he did with Denver. Outside of that, there's really nothing besides Charbonnet on Seattle side, he got some play, but rushing wise didn't look great. He did get a catch, so that was interesting. On Green Bay side, their young offense, their young offensive weapons actually look pretty decent. So Watson, Musgrave, Jaden Reed, even Dobbs or whatever you want to call them, they're all playing pretty well. So I really think that those weapons might help Love a lot and maybe can take a little pressure off of him. AJ Dillon got the start, and I think that they rested Aaron Jones. So that's really it.
Well, they do have the youngest fantasy starters in the league, so there could be some growing pains with this team, but it's definitely worth living through if you're Green Bay, and hopefully they have a quarterback that can have a connection with them. And I don't think they got their third straight Hall of Fame quarterback, but they might have one that's serviceable for a few years, and that's good enough right now.
Yeah. It looks like Green Bay's giving him a chance to be successful with what they have on the roster. So we'll
Like
see if
it.
he can maximize that and hopefully bump those numbers up a little bit. Pump those rookie numbers up.
Agreed.
Okay. So we have the Browns and Chiefs matchup. This was very high scoring preseason game. So that was interesting to me. What were your takeaways in this matchup, Jeff?
So, for this game, it did appear that there were some starters that played. It looked like Pacheco is back. So, that was interesting to see. Watson actually looked really good and had a couple of good connections with Cooper and Njoku. And then also, who is Cleveland's backup running back? It looks like John Kelly, but could they be a team that makes a move soon at the running back position?
Yeah, I don't think any of these guys are necessarily top tier backups. So they could easily make a move soon. And obviously, we'll cover it on our next episode, which is our weekly transactions after cut day. I agree with you that Watson looked pretty decent. Had that long strike to Amari Cooper, and I think that they're going to bring in someone like Tillman soon. And obviously, when it comes to Njoku, Watson has historically thrown to tight ends in the red zone area, so Njoku could be due for positive touchdown regression and getting some touchdown targets. So that's something to keep in mind for people who are looking for a starting tight end. Njoku might fall to you. On the Kansas City side, it does look like Pacheco got a carry in. He didn't play significantly. They're still trying to make Clyde Edwards a thing, and it still hasn't happened. They outside of that, they really didn't play many starters. They're trying to get Justin Ross, Justin Watson, some of these other guys out there. Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice had a very mixed game. He had 6 targets. He only came down with 3 of them. One of them was a wide open pass from Blaine Gabbert, and it was so gentle, and he still fumbled it like it was a punt return. And so I don't think he's ready for the prime time. I don't think he's ready to start yet. And it makes sense. He's just a rookie and he's playing in a read offense. So I don't think he's ready yet to be a starting wide receiver for that group. But the
We'll
talent's
see.
there.
We will see.
What's next here? We got another red team. We have the Cardinals at the Vikings. Jeff, what were your takeaways in this matchup?
So the Cardinals played mostly backups, which does point to Colt McCoy being their week 1 starter because he did not play at all. Still no updates on Kyler Murray's status, which really has me worried about his week 1 availability. Also, the Vikings played backups. So this game not only didn't tell us much, it was a backups versus backups game. So neither team took this seriously, or if they did, they wanted to see what these players did and could put on tape one last time before roster cuts.
Yeah, the only thing to me that I found interesting was rookie quarterbacks dueling in Clayton Tune and Jaron Hall. Outside of that, I didn't think there's much fantasy relevance in this one. So, like you said, it was all backups. There was no starters other than, a kicker. So, so I didn't think it was that fantasy relevant. So we'll move on to the next one, the Jets and Giants, the New York Throwdown. What were your takeaways on this one?
Oh boy, New York versus New York. Aaron Rodgers got a little bit of action in this game. And would you know that his first touchdown went to Garrett Wilson? So is that connection on? Probably. I know I've been watching Hard Knocks. I haven't watched the latest episode yet, but the receivers were having a little bit of an issue with Rodgers and gaining chemistry, but it does appear that that is on the right track. The Giants played mostly backups in their last tune-up game, so they were just trying to look to get some tape on the backups and the third stringers, just so they knew who to keep and who to cut.
Yeah, there's a few guys on this list that I think probably get cut, and they got some playing time. But it was nice to see Aaron Rodgers actually get some throws in, and Zach Wilson still looks like he made improvement over his rookie season. There wasn't that many wide receivers that I thought actually played that great in this game, but it was interesting to see Jalen Hyatt go up against Sauce Gardner. So Jalen Hyatt being the rookie wide receiver for the Giants, and Sauce Gardner being one of the top young corners who plays for the Jets. I was encouraged to see Garrett Wilson get that touchdown, and I think that he is someone that he's a young guy that Aaron Rodgers can play with and does have that connection with. So I think that people who drafted Garrett Wilson will be very comfortable and feel good about this going into the season.
Absolutely. I am ready for the season, speaking of.
All right, we are so close, Jeff. We are a little over a week left.
We
So
are.
a week from Thursday. Okay. Let's move on to Bengals in Washington. This might be a quick one as well because both of them played their backups. Was there anything that you thought was interest or noteworthy in this matchup?
So, this matchup here, there was absolutely nothing interesting going on. Both teams did not take this seriously as far as trying to win it. Both play backups, and that means that they're both ready for the regular season, and they've chosen to enter the regular season as healthy as possible.
That was interesting. Chris Evans didn't play, so maybe he solidified that number two role at running back. I think that the backup quarterbacks for Cincy aren't exactly great. Maybe Jake Browning separated himself a little bit, but Trevor Siemian doesn't look like a good backup. And if Burrow misses time at the beginning of the year, I'd be worried if I was Cincy. Maybe they pick up somebody else in the offseason after some cuts. But I was surprised that Jake Fromm looked good. Yeah, he's someone who disappeared for a while and popped back up and had a decent game. But other than that, Chris Rodriguez Jr. looks good as the number three running back behind Gibson and Robinson. Maybe if one of those guys misses time, he'll get some run as well. Wasn't much on the receiving side, so that's my takeaways there. Jeff, if you have anything else.
No, that is it. Just that's a name to file away for when, because Gibson's entering a contract year here, so that's just a name to file away going into the season with Rodriguez.
Okay. The next matchup is the Ravens and the Bucks. Did you have anything that you thought was noteworthy in this matchup?
Did Baker Mayfield look actually decent in this game, or did he actually look actually decent in this game?
He was 6 for 6 with a touchdown and no interceptions.
He was, and it did seem like Godwin was used and caught the touchdown. So there are we a little bit too low on the Godwin and Baker and Evans connection, or do you think we're priced just right?
I think the ADP is low for these guys. I don't necessarily think that they are going to put up numbers that they did previously, but I think that ADP is still low. And I think that Godwin's still going to get some targets as a slot guy. I think that Evans is the down the field threat and the contested catch threat. Baker's going to have random games where one, he's going to be lights out and exceptional. The next, he's going to be all over the place and chaotic. So I think that he's not going to be what Tom Brady was. I think that Tampa as a whole is going to be not as good as what they were, but they might be more competitive than people gave them credit for.
Agreed.
And Baltimore looks like they didn't play any of their starters at all.
No, they're ready to roll.
Yep. Okay. We have four more matchups. So the next one is a Florida matchup with the Dolphins and the Jaguars. What were your takeaways for this one?
I don't know if you saw that one play with Kelvin Ridley, but I don't know how he turned around, caught the ball, and got both of his feet in bounds, but he did it. He caught all three of his targets. So both teams looked good and ready to go for this last tune up. They both played some starters. What were your thoughts on this matchup?
I always like seeing the starters play at least a couple series, and Tua looked good. Trevor Lawrence looked good. Both of the running backs, Etienne and Bigsby, on the Jaguar side looked really good. It's hard to pinpoint Miami running backs because they all kind of fade in as the same to me. So I'm still waiting to see who the actual starter is going to be on Miami's side. Maybe they can pull off a Jonathan Taylor trade. Don't know that yet. But the receiving options on both these teams are pretty phenomenal. Calvin Ridley looks like he's back. I don't think Christian Kirk played in this matchup, or maybe he did get a couple targets actually. Just nothing as noteworthy as Ridley did. Tyreek Hill on the other side with Miami had that really nice long catch. So these are going to be very exciting offenses to follow and watch. I'm excited, and I don't think that there's anything else that sticks out to me.
Yeah, nothing that sticks out to me either, but I do feel a little bit vindicated on saying that Ridley would take over as the number one in Jacksonville because it does seem like they're going to feed him.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Hopefully, though, if for you Christian Kirk stands out there, that teams start to key in on him, and so that Kirk gets wide open, and maybe Trevor Lawrence will remember that he exists and he's on the team.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, we have the Raiders at Cowboys. What were your takeaways in this one?
Raiders at Cowboys, we have Wilkerson was a digit target monster. I'm not saying that he's definitely going to make the roster, but I notate those because those are rare in any game, let alone a preseason game. We did have one with Austin Watkins a couple weeks ago with the Browns. So when I notice it, I just notate it, move on. But it's just like a person that you would want to look at a little bit later. Raiders played the backups, and Will Greer shined with Dak calling the plays. So, as much as you say that Dak is a game manager, he literally managed this game from the sideline.
I think Will Greer looks like he's a better preseason quarterback than Dak Prescott. I had to throw preseason in there so you didn't lose your mind. But he literally is playing for a job because by this point, everyone knows that Trey Lance was traded to the Cowboys. So he's literally trying to fight for a job, and he played phenomenally for the Cowboys. Granted, it's against the Raiders, and the Raiders twos at that rate anyway. But he looked really good, and Aiden O'Connell still looks good on the Raiders side too. So I'm looking for Will Greer to be a notable backup and hopefully take over a starting spot at some point, somewhere. Aiden O'Connell, I hope he starts over Jimmy G because I think he's a better quarterback at this point. Wilkerson, like you said, came out of nowhere. So I don't know if that's really going to be fantasy relevant, but both these teams have a rookie tight end that did pretty well. So Micah Mayer with the Raiders, as well as Luke Schoonmaker, who got a touchdown in this matchup. They both got a couple catches, and that's nice to see. And I hope that they get a chance to start this year at some point.
Absolutely. How excited were you to see Schoonmaker get the touchdown?
Very excited since I got him in a trade this offseason. So I would like to see him be involved. I don't necessarily count 100% on it being this year because I do have him in a dynasty, not a redraft. So it's encouraging to see him be involved in preseason.
Absolutely, and I think there'll be a split there with Jake Ferguson, but hopefully one of the two break out because that is bad when tight ends split like that.
All right. Speaking of, tight end split here, we have the Rams at Broncos as one of our last two matchups, and I'm still curious. They had Albert O put up 109 yards and a touchdown on 7 catches. They have Troutman, who is one of Sean Payton's favorite tight ends, and they have Dulcich, who is someone that fantasy owners have been clamoring for a while now. So who is going to end up being the starting tight end? Were there any guys that you wanted to highlight on this matchup? So go ahead.
Yeah, I think Troutman will start the year off as the starting tight end because he is the incumbent for Sean Payton. But if we look at Russell Wilson's history at the tight end position, he does utilize tight ends, and he also will utilize multiple. And he did that a lot in Seattle as well. So this will actually help him quite a bit. So that'll be interesting to see as the season goes on. I think Greg Dulcich is the better receiving option long term, and I'm really hoping Sean Payton eventually comes to that conclusion as well. The Rams quit playing starters years ago, and I don't believe they'll ever play starters again under McVay unless they have a rookie starting quarterback. And then I think on the Broncos side of the house, Jaleel McLaughlin looks like he could push Pirine for the backup job. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not super huge on P Ryan, so I could see Jaleel McLaughlin potentially pushing him for the number two, but I still think P Ryan to me is better on the passing side. So I think he's always going to have a role, assuming he's healthy. But as far as the rushing side, Jaleel looks more explosive by far, and I think he's someone who's definitely going to stick around on the roster. Hopefully through cut day, we'll see how that goes. I like that Zach Evans on the Ram side got some rushes, so I hope he stays on the team and can earn that number two job. On the passing side here, we had that Albert O explosion, and I'm excited for him to have a role, if not with the Broncos, with someone else, because I think that he was underutilized the last couple seasons with the Broncos, and I want him to find a place for him to thrive. Mims
Yeah,
had a good showing, and I think Mims will be a starter potentially this year with all the injuries they have.
I agree with that. But Albert O was given every shot to be the starter last year, and he couldn't hold the job over a rookie who's now been delegated to a backup for right now as well. So I think Albert O is one of those people that we root for, but I don't really expect much production from him going forward.
Yeah, I already cut him on a dynasty roster before he had this huge explosion. So, I mean, if I don't have him, I don't want him to do well for someone else. But at the same time, I think he is talented, and I think he does probably just need to change the scenery.
We'll see if he gets it.
Okay, we have one final matchup, and it's one near and dear to my heart. It's the Houston Texans versus the New Orleans Saints. This is a preseason matchup that happens every year since Katrina, and I'm fond of both of these teams, and I like to see the preseason games. I thought that Stroud, he played two series. I thought he played very well. He only had four passes. All four of them should have been caught, in my opinion, because he put a dime right in the hands of fantasy darling Nico Collins' hands. It was over the shoulders throw on the sideline. Nico should have caught it. He didn't. Nico did end up getting a touchdown catch in the second series later, so I think he is the number one target for the team. I just don't think that he's going to produce what you want him to, because unless something changes, I don't see him being a stud. He's just going to be a volume guy initially. I'm still upset that they didn't put Tank Dell in the starting unit with Stroud, because Stroud asked for him. Tank Dell, to me, has been the best wide receiver in camp, so I think that he should be a starter. Mechie was out with an injury. I think he'll be okay for week one, but he didn't play in this matchup. Xavier Hutchinson did great with the twos. I think that he is someone that in the near future can be in the starting lineup. And on the running side for Houston, Damian Pierce got the start for the first two series with the Texans. Some of his naysayers will point that he didn't do anything in the receiving side for this matchup, but honestly, it's because they didn't throw that much with Stroud. And then when Singletary came in with the twos, Singletary got more receiving work, but overall, he doesn't look as explosive as Pierce did. But both of them are going to get carries, and I think both of them can be contributors. I think Singletary is a sneaky flex option and definitely someone who could get a bigger role if something happens to Pierce going forward. Schultz had a nice catch as well. And then on the Saints side, we had Jameis Winston starting for him. Carr sat out. Winston looked great. Miller had a lot of runs, but he didn't get any explosive runs, so he looked kind of pedestrian. But Jimmy Graham kind of surprised me this matchup. Got some very good catches. I thought he'd be cut shortly. Must not be legal issues, must actually be medical stuff. So maybe he's someone that can stick around. If that's the case, Jawan Johnson owners are going to be fretting because Jawan Johnson will not get the stats that people wanted. A.T. Perry looks good in my opinion as well, but those are really the only notable items for me. So Jeff, did you have any takeaways here?
So Jimmy Graham, it looked like they made him a focal point of the first offensive drive, and it paid off. I think he's going to vulture some touchdowns from the tight end room. I think that Taysom Hill is virtually unownable at this point because I think that they're keeping him because they have to keep him because of his salary, and he could be the personal protector for the punter, and that might be his only and main role this year. And yeah, that's kind of, and I think Stroud made a stride. You like how I did that with words there. And in his third start, I think very much like Young, looked like he took a step forward. I think those are the two quarterbacks that took a step forward to end the preseason. I don't think Anthony Richardson did that as well as Young and Stroud did. So it'll be really interesting to watch these 3 top 5 picks in the beginning of the season and see where they end the season as well, because they will be no doubt compared to each other their entire careers just because of where they went. So it was nice to see Stroud take a stride here, and it was nice to see Young take a leap earlier as well. So it's just something to watch out for. That's kind of where we're at.
All right. That was our preseason week 3 roundup for you guys. We will do our weekly news episode next and release that shortly after this one. So we just want to make sure we get all the Tuesday cut day news as well as any possible trades, and we'll have that out for you guys. Okay. Well, that does it for another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading or listening to this episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads. Please give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.